Hello there. So I want to talk about one big issue that's facing the Western world or the developed world for that case. And that issue is basically the issue of unassimilated immigrants. So we've had a huge spike of migration from developing countries all the way to the Western world. And it's creating a lot of friction because right now a lot of the like liberal intelligentsia or the establishment, as you may call it, is really pushing for this labor to come. And a lot of people wonder, why do we need so many new people? Like, a lot of liberals don't really, ask themselves, or the establishment, they don't really ask, why are we bringing these people? They just think it's a virtue thing. They just think it's we have to be kind, since in the past our nations, we pillaged, we invaded, quote unquote, we, looted these nations. So as, to make up for that, we need to let these people into our countries, and they have to, they need to share in the wealth that we have, quote unquote, that we stole from them. That's kind of like the narrative they have. And basically that argument is kind of shitty, because it's basically based on guilt. It's not really based on facts or economics, or, people don't really like ask too much about the why we're bringing these people in. Because if you do ask, you're going to be labeled. You're going to be called a racist, a xenophobe. You're going to be called something, an ism, a typical, like, basically when somebody calls you that and you're not being blatantly racist or whatever, it's basically like a defense mechanism. Like, they don't have an argument against your point, but they're just using it to, label you, kind of like, the Salem witch trials. If you don't agree with what the Puritans say, then you're a witch. So that's the same thing with liberals and racism now. If you don't agree with liberals, you're racist. So, but everybody knows that already. So back to the topic. So nobody's really questioning why we bring these people to the Western world. I'm going to be mainly focused on the U.S. because I'm an American and I live in the U.S. And I think the biggest cause for this massive push for migration, not necessarily that they're like passing laws to let migrants in, but they're just being ignorant to the fact that they're just pouring in illegally. I think the biggest reason, truly, why like Democrats and the establishment want that is because they drive labor prices down, right? That's the biggest economic impact illegal migration has. A lot of people talk about raising the minimum wage and why don't we have a fair wage for the U.S. It's because the U.S. has gone through huge inflation in every aspect of consumer goods. So everything's more expensive: college, housing, food, you know, mostly everything's more expensive, but for some reason our wages don't go up. And if you think about it, fundamentally, wages should go up with the rest of like, the basket of goods that people consume, right? But this country just keeps adding more and more labor. Like, the labor supply in this country is huge, especially for cheap labor, like middle class jobs. Like, businesses can justify lower wages because, look at this pool of Mexican migrants that I can just hire for half, and then I just tell them, if you work for me for half, I won't report you to the authorities, blah blah. So wages is the biggest impact. So my theory, or probably the reality, is that there's a lot of pressure from corporations to push for this migration. They want to maximize profit. They want the cheapest labor possible, and illegal immigrants are the best way to do that. And the thing is, like, these people, they don't think about the consequences, the social fabric, the culture of the United States. They don't really think about how, in the long term, all this migration is going to impact the U.S. Like, we have warring factions right now in our politics debating, every issue. But honestly, like, at this point, we can't really have a conversation anymore. We're not debating politics at this point. Like, I feel like I'm a conservative, and I feel like in my side, we can debate, morality of an issue. We can debate the economics of an issue. We can debate if it's affordable, if it's constitutional. Like, we can have those debates, and like, people won't like shit at each other. They'll have differing views and whatever. But I kind of feel like on the other side, people are so, it's like it's some kind of zealotry. Like it's, for me, like the way I view it, I feel like it's turned into a religion. I feel like we're like the right is debating policy while the left is debating like religious principle. Like it's gotten to a point where you really can't have a debate because people have such strong beliefs. Like they're not going to give them up. So it's just impossible to debate on the left. So the big crux is we have all these immigrants that we're letting into the U.S. We're trying to stop it. We voted for Trump, the wall. I think the wall's going to do some work, but it's not going to do 100%. It's still going to happen. If these corporations and these establishment guys want illegals to come in and, flip states, like how they're flipping Texas right now, it's going to happen because we're basically living with two countries in one, And the huge problem with these unassimilated immigrants is that they don't have any allegiance to the country they're moving to. And that happens a lot in Europe with a lot of like Muslim migrants. I can't really like say, oh, all Muslims or all Mexicans or all whatever, like there's obviously exceptions, but the vast majority of these kind of like economic migrants, they only care about making money. They only care about, improving their lives, but they don't think about the actual country that they're joining. They don't really think about the culture of that country. They don't really think about why the country they're joining has been successful and prosperous and why the country they left is completely torn apart or it's a shithole, Like you can't really, like these people don't think about that stuff and they think that it's not because of them, but honestly the biggest determinant of like success for a country, it's a culture, right? So if you bring that culture that you left to a new country and think it's going to work out, it's just not going to work out, right? Like if we replace the entire population of the U.S., left it as is, just replace the population, like all the Mexicans would live in the U.S. and then all the Americans would live in Mexico, like the economies would drastically change. As in like what makes your economy good is the work ethic and the values taught in your culture. And I really think it's a huge problem we have with dealing with a lot of people that really don't care about assimilating to the U.S., to the America, to the U.S. Because, like, we don't really encourage that, right? Like, these people that want these migrants, to hire them for cheap jobs. Oh, just do my work, make my profits. I don't care what you do. You can shoot each other in your little ghettos as long as you show up to my factory or to my fucking vineyard and you chop some wood, like, I don't care if you guys are, committing crime because I live in my, 99% white, like upper class estates, where literally we don't see the problems, but middle class America is completely getting fucked. Like middle class America is just being destroyed systematically by the global corporations in this country. I think one of the big problems that the middle class of America is facing is that a lot of American companies are not really American anymore. Because back then when the world wasn't as connected, when the world was more, local, like American companies usually just served American customers. These companies had a vested interest, to care for Americans and care for what they cared about. But now profits are global. They don't have to care about Americans if they're making money in China, India, Europe, Africa, in like anywhere, Australia. Like if the Americans complain, they're still going to make money, right? Like these global corporations don't care about the people in the country that they're headquartered at. So they don't really advocate for pro-American policies, pro-U.S. citizen policies, because they don't give a fuck. They just want to maximize profits. And in the U.S., they can leave the U.S. whenever they want, and their company's going to exist, and they're going to make money regardless. So that's one big reason why these people and these establishment guys don't care about the U.S. So basically, to wrap it all up, we just have a massive influx of, unassimilated migrants into the U.S., and there's going to be a huge cultural clash at some point because this country doesn't have infinite resources, right? Like we had poverty we had violence, we had crime before these people got here, and these people are just multiplying those effects. Like these people, like if we can't make the poor of 100 years ago, like if we still have poor people, especially like in black communities that have been here for hundreds of years, imagine, and we can't lift them out of poverty, or we haven't been able to lift them out of poverty. Imagine this huge influx of poor migrants trying to get lifted up too, right? It's going to be basically impossible. Like, but the problem is, like, one party is completely benefiting from these migrants, and the fact that they're poor too, because the fact that they depend on government to move up in life, that really like helps the Democrats a lot, because that's basically free votes. You see all these southern, like, Southwest states, and especially Texas. Texas is going to be the next, like, it's going to be it's going to tip the iceberg, right? Once Texas is like unwinnable for Republicans, this country's over. Like, the United States will go to civil war, or the United States is going to radically change and balkanize, because real middle Americans will never be able to be represented in the government, And it's a tragedy. I personally feel like in 20 years it'll happen, so it'll happen in my lifetime. I'm fairly young, so I'm probably going to see it. And it's going to be tragic that we're going to reach such a dark period in our history, but it's inevitable unless something radically has to change, like the asylum laws. We have to, deport more, or we need to have, we need to teach our values to the people that are already in here. We need to teach values, we need to Americanize them, but I highly doubt it. One of the core American principles that began with the revolutionaries and the founding fathers is that we don't trust the government. We don't want government in our lives. That's a core tenet of being an American. And if you like government, basically you're just foregoing what this country is about, right? And these people depend on the government. These people, if the federal government didn't give all these benefits, they would never be able to, live in this country sustainably, because they're not making enough for themselves, and they're not skilled enough to, like, be self-sustaining in this country, right? They barely speak English. They don't have, high job skills, So, yeah, this country, there's going to be a lot of issues, and I think we are not really talking about the fact that a lot of these migrants are not being assimilated. I think the Republicans are trying to touch on it, but, in this climate that we have right now, you're just going to be labeled a racist or a xenophobe. So yeah, I don't have any solutions. The way I think about it is, the world is gonna do what the world is gonna do regardless of what you think, right? Like, it's hard to have impact, especially on a macro level as an individual. You have to go to your job. You just live your own life. And if migrants are flooding in, you can't really do anything unless you, like, take matters to your own hands. But that's easier said than done, right? What can you feasibly legally do? You could, like, have a militia and patrol the border and report people, but, like, that's going to, like, lead to issues, and that's not where the country's headed, So I feel like this country, we are at the turning point. We might be, like, in the 1850s in terms of, like, social conflict, So maybe in a decade, or maybe in a couple decades, it's going to be too far gone. So that's basically all I have to say. Like, I hope America, improves, but I just see the political climate getting worse and worse. And, I'm just going to pray for a better future. And until next time, guys.